From an unknown point in time, the streets of Tokyo were suddenly infested with bloodthirsty and formidable monsters, born from the mutation of humans. At first glance, they appeared no different from ordinary people, but once they entered combat mode or began to hunt, their true nature would be revealed. Their eyes turned crimson, and their bodies sprouted incredibly powerful tentacles for attack. What was even more terrifying was that their diet consisted of only one thing: humans. Hence, people had given these creatures a dread-inducing name: Tokyo ghouls. Our story begins with a man named Kaneki. His first ever date would introduce him to the legendary ghouls. Kaneki had expected love, but instead found himself preyed upon. Realizing his peril, Kaneki attempted to flee, but how could an ordinary person escape the clutches of a ghoul's hunt? The ghoul revealed its true form, first crippling Kaneki, rendering him half-paralyzed, and then hoisting him into the air with its tentacles. In despair, Kaneki could only await his impending demise, but at that very moment, a miracle occurred. A steel beam from a high-rise building plummeted and struck the ghoul below, sparing Kaneki. To save him, the doctors transplanted ghoul's organs into him without Kaneki's knowledge. From that point onward, Kaneki's life would be forever changed. Upon his release from the hospital, Kaneki's close friend Hideyoshi treated him to a meal. However, as Kaneki gazed upon his once favorite dishes, he found himself devoid of any appetite and even felt a sense of nausea. He mustered the strength to take a small bite, only to promptly regurgitate it. Back at home, Kaneki started to look for food in the fridge. Strangely, he couldn't bring himself to consume anything, be it vegetables or milk. Unbeknownst to him, due to the ghoul organ transplant, he had become a half-human, half-ghoul creature, capable of subsisting only on human flesh. In a daze, Kaneki saw the same woman again, seemingly attempting to take over his body. Terrified, he rushed to the bathroom to regain his composure, only to discover that his right eye had turned crimson. The intense hunger forced Kaneki to venture into the bustling streets of Tokyo. He watched the sea of people walking by, his hunger becoming unbearable. However, the last shreds of his sanity held him back, preventing him from succumbing to his desires. But then Kaneki smelled something. Yes, it was the smell of food. Kaneki followed the scent into a secluded alley where crimson blood pooled at his feet. Startled, Kaneki looked up and saw a ghoul feasting on its prey. The ghoul, too, was startled but breathed a sigh of relief upon realizing that it was another of its kind. It even extended an invitation for Kaneki to join in the meal. However, before the words fully left the ghoul's mouth, its head was kicked away by a swift and forceful kick from someone. Kaneki, in utter shock, had never witnessed such a scene and was left bewildered. Another ghoul began to approach him slowly. It turned out that ghouls had their own rules, and not every place was open for hunting. Clearly, Kaneki was seen as an intruder. Nishiki pinned Kaneki against the wall, preparing to teach him a lesson. But just then, another female ghoul appeared, claiming the territory as her own. They fight, but Nishiki is knocked out in a single glance. Realizing he was outmatched, Nishiki had no choice but to make a hasty retreat. Kaneki, too, was frightened by the aura of the girl and quickly fled the scene. However, it didn't take long for hunger to once again overtake Kaneki. So, he returned to the same alley and found the girl, Kirishima, seeking her help for a meal. But faced with Kaneki's plea, Kirishima remained cold and suggested he figure it out himself. Kaneki explained that he was new to being a ghoul and didn't want to harm innocent people. He even knelt down in desperation. However, this act didn't earn him sympathy. Instead, it disgusted Kirishima. Fortunately, an elderly ghoul, also part of their kind, arrived on the scene. Following the principle of ghouls helping one another, he took Kaneki to his coffee shop. There, he introduced Kaneki to a ghoul mother and daughter. Yoshimura prepared a cup of coffee for Kaneki, urging him to drink it quickly. With trepidation, Kaneki took a sip and found it surprisingly palatable. He didn't feel sick or nauseated, and it had been so long since he had eaten that he was on the verge of tears. It turned out that ghouls had a fondness for coffee, which could alleviate their hunger to some extent. However, this is not a complete substitute for the need for human flesh. Soon, the mother-daughter pair prepared to leave, and Yoshimura handed them a significant package with a meaningful look. As Kaneki was about to depart, he, too, received a similar package. He knew what was inside and initially thought about refusing it. He knew what was in it and was going to refuse. But Yoshimura told him that ghouls' hunger was 7 times greater than ghouls. It's a level of pain no one can handle. Kaneki reluctantly changed his mind, but as he returned home, determined to try the forbidden meat, he heard Hideyoshi's voice outside. Hideyoshi left a bag of food and made plans to meet Kaneki at school the next day. The appearance of his best friend once again helped Kaneki control his urges. He tossed the hard-won bag of human flesh into the trash bin. On the following day, Kaneki, in order to conceal his transformation from Hideyoshi, deliberately wore an eye patch as he met with him. Hideyoshi led Kaneki to an underground basement, intending to introduce him to an upperclassman. To Kaneki's astonishment, the upperclassman turned out to be none other than Nishiki, the ghoul he had encountered that fateful night. Hideyoshi was still introducing them to each other. Kaneki was too scared to speak. He thought Nishiki wouldn't dare to do anything in broad daylight, but the next moment, seeing Nishiki grabbing his buddy, Kaneki rushed up to stop him, but was rewarded with a hard kick. Kaneki picks up another cue and goes up to Nishiki and smashes him. To his shock, the cue bent under the impact, leaving Nishiki unharmed. This action further enraged Nishiki. Nishiki extends his Kagun, a symbol of power, and sends Kaneki flying, then grabs him and throws him into the house. In the face of absolute power, Kaneki is left defenseless and is crushed unilaterally. After knocking Kaneki down, Nishiki prepared to end Hideyoshi's life using his Kagun. Witnessing his best friend about to be killed, Kaneki's ghoul abilities were fully activated. He unleashed his Kagun at the last moment, saving Hideyoshi. Nishiki attempted to resist but was no match for Kaneki in his current state. Kaneki pinned him down, initially hesitant to take Nishiki's life, but Nishiki, on the face of surrender, is preparing a sneak attack. Luckily, Kaneki had already recognized his ruse through the lenses of her glasses and eventually made him eat his own words. Nishiki, who didn't get his way, is ready to leave, but by this time Kaneki is completely enraged, and he extends his Kagun to close the steel door, and then stabs Nishiki right through with it. Once he had calmed down, Kaneki quickly checked on Hideyoshi's condition, but looking at Hideyoshi's head full of blood, Kaneki could no longer control his own desire, decisively hugged Hideyoshi's head and licked it. Luckily, Kirishima and Rinji arrived in time, otherwise the consequences would have been disastrous. When Kaneki woke up, he was taken to the cafe, and Hideyoshi was taken to the hospital to save his life. Since Ghoul's healing power is so horrible, Nishiki wasn't killed and will probably come back to get Kaneki. On Yoshimura's advice, Kaneki decided to stay at the coffee shop to assist and learn how to survive in the human world while concealing his ghoul identity. Late one night, Rinji took Kaneki out to find food. However, instead of hunting humans in the city, they ventured into the wilderness and discovered a recently deceased corpse. It was at this moment that Kaneki finally realized that they weren't indiscriminately killing innocent people but seeking out the bodies of suicide victims in desolate areas for sustenance. And Kaneki began to accept it. But even this kind of ghoul doesn't mean it's acceptable to humans. A mysterious organization known as the CCG existed to combat ghouls, and its investigators were considered formidable individuals. Now they're investigating the mother and daughter in the cafe, and the ghouls are aware of this. To be safe, Yoshimura had to find a new place for mother and daughter to leave and hide for a while. Due to their shared love for the same book, Kaneki and the young girl Hanami had become close friends who shared everything. Before leaving, however, Hanami has one last wish, to pay her respects at the grave of her father, who was killed by the CCG. Hanami begged Kaneki to help him fulfill this wish. Without giving it much thought, Kaneki went to Hanami's father's grave under the cover of night, unaware that their every move was being watched by the CCG. As Kaneki left, they swiftly dug up the grave, discovering a distinctive ghoul mask inside, confirming the identities of the mother and daughter. The following day, as the mother and daughter were leaving, Amon and his mentor, Churio, intercepted them beneath an overpass. In order to cover her daughter's departure, the woman exploded Kagun. Hanami managed to escape and headed back to the coffee shop seeking help. On her way, she coincidentally met Kaneki, who was coming to bring her an umbrella. However, by the time they returned to the scene, the woman was gravely wounded and eventually brutally killed, leaving Kaneki, knowing he couldn't confront the attackers, helpless to intervene. Knowing that he was no match for his opponent, Kaneki didn't dare to come forward to rescue him, but just watched the scene. Back at the coffee shop, Kaneki was overwhelmed with guilt, but Kirishima's anger couldn't be contained. Recognizing Kirishima's fiery temper, Yoshimura chose to remain passive. Later that night, Kirishima found Amon and killed his comrades. Amon intended to retrieve their dropped weapons but was beaten to it by Kirishima, who knocked him to the ground. As Kirishima was about to finish him off, Curio arrived in the nick of time. The weapon he's holding is called Quinqua, and it's made from the Kagun on Ghoul's body. That's why the searchers are so powerful. Kirishima knew he was no match for him and had to run away. Seeing the injured Kirishima, Kaneki initially intends to comfort her, but is met with merciless ridicule. A devastated Kaneki can only take a shower to calm down. He didn't want to harm anyone, but he also wanted to protect his companions. Thus, Kaneki promptly sought Kirishima, who was undergoing rehabilitation training, expressing his desire to become stronger. Kirishima didn't hesitate to accept, and he had a tough regimen in mind. With Kirishima's guidance, Kaneki embarked on an intense training program, which, in just a few days, significantly boosted his combat abilities and taught him how to control his Kagun. Of course, before the battle began, a signature mask was sure to be arranged, but before they could make their move, the two searching officers had already begun their arrest plan. They placed Hinami's mother's severed hand under a familiar overpass. They used the smell to lure Hinami out. Seeing that his prey has taken the bait, Curio calls him on for backup. Though Hinami attempted to escape, she was soon caught. At the critical moment, a few Kagun were shot at him, and it was none other than Kirishima, but that's within Curio's plans, and they go head-to-head again. Kirishima's Kagun, which resembled wings and could shoot out feathers, granted her a certain advantage in ranged combat. However, Curio's Quinqua is flexible and can easily withstand Kirishima's Kagun attacks. Kirishima was once again defeated and knocked down. On the other side, Amon was on his way when he was confronted by a mysterious figure dressed in black. It was none other than Kaneki, who had grown immensely powerful. The powerful aura of Amon dared not slack off. He rushed to pull out his own Quinqua. They engaged in a fierce battle, but Kaneki, relying solely on his fists, proved to be no match for Amon. He was swiftly pushed back, and just as Amon swung his weapon once more, Kaneki took the opportunity to jump onto Amon's back, sinking his teeth into Amon's shoulder. Despite Amon's efforts to shake Kaneki off, Kaneki had tasted blood and had become ferocious. He instantly unleashed 3 Kagun tentacles, launching a frenzied counterattack against Amon. Faced with this bloodthirsty beast, Amon could only endure the relentless assault. In the end, Amon's weapon was destroyed, and he was thrown heavily onto an overturned car. Kaneki pursued him and used his Kagun to immobilize Amon completely. At that moment, Kaneki had transformed completely and seemed ready to devour his prey. It wasn't until he saw his own reflection in the pool of blood that Kaneki slowly regained his sanity. Not wanting to take a life, Kaneki chose to spare Amon. Meanwhile, the battle on the other side was equally intense. Kirishima managed to get the upper hand and knocked out Wu Liang's weapon, but Curio pulled out another. That's right, Hinami's mother has been made into a Quinqua by him. Kirishima is once again in danger as she is wrapped up in a Quinqua and then thrown to the ground. Curio picks up the fallen weapon and starts beating Kirishima like crazy. However, just as Curio was about to strike the final blow, his raised left hand suddenly flew off. It was Hinami, who had inherited her parents' abilities and awakened her Kagun. Curio was so excited when he saw it. Now he's going to have a new weapon. However, within seconds, he had one of his legs severed, but even in the face of his parents' murderer, the kind-hearted Hinami still couldn't bear to kill him. It was Kirishima who acted decisively, using all his strength to kill Curio. Finally, Kaneki came here. Even though they've got their revenge now, it doesn't end there. By killing 2 CCG members, they had set themselves on a path filled with even more peril.